Assalamu alaikum everyone. Welcome to another episode of Trade Talks, a PSW podcast series. Trade Talks is produced in collaboration with Pakistan Single Window and Sustainable Development Policy Institute. The purpose of this podcast series is to keep you updated on the recent international trade ecosystem, and cross border trade issues and happening in the world. I am Abdullah Khalid, project coordinator at Sustainable Development Policy Institute, and the host for today's podcast. Today, we'll be talking about digital trade, revolutionizing it with Osman Nasir. In today's world, digital trade has played a very important role in revitalizing and revamping the cross-border trade. Blockchain, in particularly, has emerged as promising technology to improve the cross border, particularly when it comes to its decentralized and secure ledger system. Uh, it also has the potential to make things easier, the way we do the transactions, by making it more transparent, by making it more cheaper and fast. Cross border trade in Pakistan is a very crucial and important element of the economy. When it comes to the initiatives taken by the government of Pakistan, they have tried to stimulate, they have tried to revitalize, they have tried to bring more systems and more steps that could ensure the cross border trade is more effective for the businesses and the traders. Pakistan Single Window is also another initiative where they are bringing together all the government agencies who are looking into the cross border trade into one platform. The purpose of today's podcast is to reflect and to talk about the possibilities of digital trade that are available in the current ecosystem. For today, we have been joined by Mr. Osman Nasir, who is a technology strategies expert. Mr. Osman Nasir has previously been working as managing director of the Pakistan Software Export Board. Under Usman's leadership, Pakistan formulated its first national IT enhancement framework, and Usman Sab has been able to revamp the overall IT and IT's services in Pakistan by uplifting it to 81% during his tenure. Usman Sab has also been looking into spreading the umbrella of software technology parks into the second tier cities, towns, where it has led to 145% increase of registration of small technology based startups and firms. Thank you for joining us today. For today, we'll be talking to you regarding the digital trade in different aspects, and we have six particular questions for you that we'll be posing to you. If we can look into the trade. No doubt, trade plays a very important role in revamping the overall economic structure of the country by creating opportunities for investment, by bringing job creation, and also by bridging the gap between the public and the private sector. But when we look into 2023, we see that there had been many ups and downs. Where the country had to face many socio-political instabilities. They had to face high commodity and high fuel prices, led to the depreciation of the Pakistani rupee against the dollar. But if we can just talk particularly about the digital trade, how do you perceive the current state of the digital trade in Pakistan, and what challenges are being faced by the traders and the businesses? And keeping in view your perspective and your experience, I would request if you could reflect on it, please.
Thank you, Abdullah. Thank you for having me. My past stint with the Pakistan Software Export Board exposed a lot of intricacies of this subject to me, and and while I was focusing on the digital trade, I also looked at what's wrong with our goods trades as well. So let's focus on the digital trades first, and I, we have a conversation about the potential of that for Pakistan. Now, when I joined in 2020, August, that when our digital trade, Pakistan digital trade, or software exports were somewhere around at $1.4 billion. Um, when I left in 2022 August, exactly 24 months later, we saw a growth of 81%, and it went up to roughly $2.7 billion. Now, what we realize in all of that is that very little elements are needed to be fixed to uplift our trade, and that helped me looked into the goods trades as well of the country. The key factor this country is struggling with is the trade deficit. I personally feel every other deficit is something that you can fix. Your fiscal deficit is something, just a, if you are a non-traded currency on the international markets, your fiscal deficit is just a number on somebody's Excel sheet, nothing else. As long as your trade deficit is in control, and trade deficit is actually, if it's great, if it's in surplus, if that happens, then you're in control of your economy. I'll give you an example. Now, when we say that ITC saw a 81% trade, export growth in just 2 years' time, that export growth came in with that export or that trade being 83% trade surplus as well. So if we are having a trade of $3.2 billion altogether, the exports were $2.7 billion of that part. So it was hugely trade surplus. And that made me look into the other elements of services. And one of the elements that I looked into was the export. So the fees that we pay to international carriers for export of goods, that fee was hugely trade imbalanced. So then I realized that we are actually using foreign elements for conducting our goods trades as well, because most of the money is going out and we have very less of the money coming in. And there we see the potential of reviving organizations like Pakistan National Shipping Corporation. If we have that in place again, we'll be able to balance that gap. That helped me understand the what is the importance of PIA being a international cargo carrier. That helped me understand the importance of using your road and rail network to enable your transit situation as a country. And we've all been talking about the potential of CPAC and what it can do for the country, but how ready are we? So that is the question that we pose back to ourselves, and we figure out what do we need to do to actually enable CPAC in its true sense. And I see the potential can be a single platform, or multiple platforms which would come into a single umbrella that provide complete traceability. It provides the resistance against leakages, because if you are establishing yourself as a trade corridor, then you need to ensure whoever is trading through you that there's no leakages of goods when the trade is using your corridor to more destination countries.
Thank you, Sponsor, for sharing your thoughts. Uh, Indeed, the logistic network needs to be looked into because the traders in the business community are facing issues when it comes to the cross border trade. On the contrary, when we look into the tech industries, they are facing issues in terms of trust when it comes to consumers, whether it's the product or it's the payment mechanism that they are looking into. Majority of the tech industries, when it comes to the payment, and they are facing issues such as in the e-commerce industry, it's the PayPal or it's any other method that they're using, any international method they're using to ensure that the transactions are done smoothly. But we have seen that within Pakistan there are issues being faced by them, which slows down the economic activity, resulting in a loss of loss of most of the clientele by the traders and the business community or into tech industry. So, if we look into the potential challenges being faced by these tech industries, how do you perceive, in terms of your experience, how digital technologies can be helpful in facilitating the cross-border trade when it comes to AI, blockchain, e-commerce, in these perspectives?
Good question. Traditionally, we are a very um, we are a country which is set very heavy downwards to with its own traditions and its own egos that goes into the conversation. What I've felt is it is very easy to solve these problems. All that we have to do is to talk to each other. All that we have to do is to have that confidence in each other, that whatever we are going to confide in the other party, they would come back with a positive feedback, and they would come back with a resolution. Well, what we have seen, even in the payment industry and the banking industry, is that needless frictions. One bank's system is not going to talk to another bank system. If you go in as a payment integrator, you won't find any willing partners to come and integrate with you. Everybody is trying to figure out that how they can live in a world where their siloed system would make them more money and more profits, rather than having a collaborative environment. And what we have seen over the past few years is that world is has moved. The technology has allowed the world to move towards a more collaborative ecosystem. And what we have seen is everybody's profit has dropped by doing that. But the overall scope of the pie has grown so big that it has taken care of the drop profits. So the what we have seen in economies like Singapore, like Dubai, and now a lot of other countries in our neighborhood, is that the adoption of technologies has grown the transaction volume value so much that whatever was lost in per transaction margin has been made up by the number of transactions which are being made. Now, you talk about blockchain and AI. So there's some good news on the government's front. Last year, we were able to get a project, World Bank funded project, Digital Economy Enhancement Program, or DEEP, and we were able to induct Pakistan's first digital exchange layer platform in it. It was to be funded somewhere around by with 78 to 80 million dollars of funds from World Bank. And the idea around this project is that how can we create a single fabric of communication and network infrastructure and software communication. An API layer can be, or a data exchange layer can be, which would connect all of our several departments. Now, what's on a stake? What's on a stake is, when we see cargo coming into the country, it sits there for a while in the anchorage, then the ship comes in, deliver the container, then the entire custom process starts. It takes 4 or 5 days, or it should not. It's actually criminal to let it happen. And then then we allow the ship to be resupplied with the export items on it, and then we allow it to go out. Um, it makes us a unfeasible country for port of calling for a lot of shipping agencies and entities. And they would rather say, okay, Pakistan is not preferred because we waste time, we waste money, we waste resources. We can fix it. We can fix it with the intent of everybody coming together, the banks coming together, the governments coming together. The government says, hey, there you go, here's your data exchange layer. Now you can put your software transactions on top of it, and these softwares can start integrating with each other. If we have a blockchain based platform, then we have that immutable transaction record, uh, which can be an LC document, which can be a bill of lading, which can be all of those documents combined. And we have that data. We can process it quickly. not days, not even hours, maybe in minutes. Once we do this, we reduce that transaction time, and we allow all these entities to come in and find that difference that Pakistan can probably make, and then they say, okay, Pakistan is actually finally facilitating us, helping us in the process, instead of making it hard for us. And hopefully, because of the other benefits that we provide, the low cost labor, the low cost of production, if we provide these elements as well, that ease of trade and frictionless trade as well, you probably will find a lot of international companies looking to come and make Pakistan the hub for production and trade as well.
Thank you very much. You've rightly pointed that there is a dire need to look into this thing, particularly for attracting more foreign investment. We have to not just look into the networks that we have, the systems that we have developed, but on the contrary, we have to also reduce the leakages that are present within the cross-border trade. So, as you had already pointed out in your earlier comment, that the leakages in the cross-border trade also result in many factors that are leading to. What do we say, that particularly when it comes to end-to-end traceability of the goods, we have seen that when we try to cover the local movement of the good received or sent via the cross border, the leakages that happen through the land routes or the sea routes, and even through the air routes in case if it happens. So the potential international transit trade is impacted by that. So how can we enable the end-to-end traceability? It's either by using the blockchain methodology, or it's by developing an integrated system that can help in reducing not just the end-to-end traceability, but also the leakages via these routes that we adopt.
So it will take multiple pieces of puzzles. So the first element is, where you rightly say, blockchain can play a part, because then we can have a immutable document right at this end, immutable document right at that end, and we can prove that what has been traded, its value was, what were the terms, so on and so forth. So that can be covered as an LC document, that can be covered on every single checkpoint as an NFT document that the driver can show to the checkpoint, and they can scan it, and they would know what goods are being transported. B, you would require a lot of physical infrastructure as well. So physical infrastructure where you are talking about the weight of the trucks when it moves from Karachi to Larkana and to Sevan and all the way into Punjab and goes uses the CPAC route. You'll be able to see that if there's any weight variation throughout that transaction. There are already systems in Pakistan which are used by our blue chip customers. And in full disclosure, I'm advising one of such systems called OpenPort, which allows you a complete traceability, which allows you complete route deviation report on every single kilometer. It can tell you that, okay, so the route was planned from here to here, but the driver has deviated from this route by that much. It has stopped on this particular unscheduled stop, and you can immediately contact the driver. You can immediately contact your staff over there. You can figure out what's happening. That is one deterrence. So you once the deterrence comes in, it will make it harder for all these funny incidents to happen. And once you have such an infrastructure in place, which is adopted by banks, which is adopted by our customs, by our trade authorities, by our highway authorities, once it is adopted, once it's on a single network, then you'll be able to showcase to the countries and the entities who are willing to use you as a trade route. As you've said, there's very little possibility of leakages on air corridor. There's very little possibility of leakages on the sea corridor. There's always possibility of leakages on the road network and the rail network. So if that we bring in these technologies, We connect our infrastructure, we enable our highways to be connected highways, and this is where our telecom infrastructure would come in place. If we enable all of that, then we be able to showcase to the prospects, the traders, and the prospect countries to use us as a corridor entity or corridor country.
Very insightful. Very insightful, Usman. Very insightful. But I think there are a few things that we have to look into: how the public sector is playing its role and how the private sector is playing its role. They both are performing differently, but with the same agenda. And as the government departments are functioning, trying to just not just improve but to revamp the overall cross border trade, similarly, the private sector is taking some initiatives. But being an expert, being a technology strategist, how do you see and how do you suggest and what steps are required to bring in public private partnerships to not just only towards digital cross border trade, but what challenges they are facing and what challenges are need to be removed at this time, keeping in view the current condition we're going through, and what is the key role that you think the private sector should play with the public sector to ensure and bring public private partnerships successful?
Abdullah, I believe the first fix needs to be at the public sector. The private sector can only respond to it. We, as you know, as guardians of the economic ecosystem, as the public sector, we have to fix ourselves first. So when I say we, I still talk about my previous role as the Pakistan Software Export Board. But the question is now, we incentivize people to be not to be in the structured trade, because what we create frictions in the name of regulations, rules. Then we create in those frictions, then we create elements of corruptions, and we do this sometimes knowingly, sometimes unknowingly. So the problem that we see is, because of these frictions, because of these regulations, rules, and issues, which when people find them, they'll say, what if I'm not part of the system? If I'm not part of the system, then I'm not going to do any of those stuff, and there'll be a cost to it. And they said, okay, that cost would be 70% of the cost of compliance. So if I just pay 70% of the cost of compliance, I don't have to comply, I don't have to waste all my time, and I still be cheaper, I still be faster. So first of all, we have to create a system which is much cheaper, much easier, much without much friction, or reduced friction compared to the non-structured sector. And that can only be done if we all come together. So first of all, we have to stop creating these horizontal regulators. You know what horizontal regulators are? Horizontal regulators are, let's say, your labor department. So your labor department is a horizontal regulator. It is applicable on IT, it is applicable on banking, it is applicable on shipping, it is applicable on, every single element. So it cuts the economy horizontally. What happens? What happens because um, the labor department has no clue of what are the requirement of labor for shipping industry, and they have no clue how they would going to differentiate it with the requirements of the banking industry. So they apply the same hammer on everybody. Once they do that, nobody is incentivized. No, everybody is unhappy because they said, oh, no, this is not relevant to me. This may be relevant to the shipping industry, but it's not relevant to the banking industry. It's maybe relevant to the banking industry and not relevant to the IT industry. So what we need to do first, as a nation, we need to understand we have to have vertical regulators. If we have one regulator, let's say if you are an international company coming into Pakistan, you are an international shipping company coming into Pakistan, and I tell you that as when you come into Pakistan, there is only one regulator that you have to talk to, and that is the shipping and logistics regulator. That's it. You don't have to, nobody else would come knocking your door. Nobody else come in and tell you what to do. There's only one regulator. And that one regulator, once we create that system, that one regulator will be responsible for not just implying the regulation, but actually that can be made responsible for what is happening with the shipping industry. So the Prime Minister can turn around, the ECC and the Cabinet can turn around and ask the regulator, hey, We've made you the single owner, single responsible for this particular industry. Why this industry is not growing? Such a person can be fired. The head can be fired and can be, so first of all, we have to fix ourselves. Number two, when we talk about what can we do together as public private partnership, think about the banks coming in together and becoming part of that blockchain ecosystem, or becoming part of the data exchange layer platforms. The two are different. Once they become part of that ecosystem, they would be able to see, okay, what is the volume of trade, which is stuck, or the value of trade which is stuck in the banking cycles for 6 days instead of 6 hours, and what is our customers losing from that, from that slowness. Then we can have the fintechs coming in, and the fintechs comes in, and fintech says, okay, how about we come in and we enable factor financing. Some other fintech can come in and say, how about we come in and we take care of the entire cash cycle of shipping and trucking, and replace it with digital money instead. Then another fintech can come in and say, oh, how about we come in and we digitize the entire purchase of tires and air filters and oil filters of the trucks which are used for being for these trades. Then we talk about where our telecom would come in. Our telecom would come in and digitize our highways. So we would know that where a certain truck is, it can provide a secondary network other than the satellite network, and can provide a secondary IoT network, which will allow automatic weighing of, let's say, of the truck at every single kilometer. You would know that the truck was stopped because the driver was having his lunch. After the truck has restarted, is there a reduction in weight of the container or not? You put all of that together, then you put in the government infrastructure together, then you put in the customs infrastructure together. Once you have that on a single data exchange layer, once you have them talking to each other, open APIs networks, cloud-based SaaS platforms which are easy for everybody to adopt. Do you go to the biggest of the importer, or the trader, or the exporter, or you go to the smallest one? Both, if both of them are enabled on digital networks, then you can see a full end-to-end picture. You'll be able to unlock people's money by putting in factor financing. A distributor of a certain good has bought 3 billion rupees of that goods, right? And it's sitting in his warehouse for 2 weeks before it gets out to the retailers, and the retailers start paying him. For that period, his 3 billion rupees are stuck. How can we incentivize that? How can we bring in factor financing and say, hey, here you go, here's your 3 billion, all that you have to pay this much, and this should increase your revenue, it will increase your margins, this will increase your ability to do business, increase your volume altogether. And we see all that frictionless trade and frictionless partnerships coming into play.
Truly, uh, very insightful. For me, it was very insightful, and indeed, even for the audience, it would be. So, but just coming back and jumping to the title of today's podcast, when we talk about digital trade and being an expert, and when we look into the revolutionary part of it, and the technology is advancing day by day. So, how do you think, what role could be played by the technology? I'll say again, blockchain, AI, particularly the big data. How could they be helpful in facilitating the cross-border trade, particularly for Pakistan Single Window, which is an initiative of the government for facilitating the cross-border mechanism in Pakistan?
Abdullah, trade is always a derivative of your supply and demand. Um, Whatever you are producing in country and whatever you are not producing in your country, whatever is needed in your country, whatever is not needed in your country, it usually results into trade. So if I am producing a lot of soybean, and I do not have value for soybean in my country, but you are not producing soybean, but your country requires and values soybean, then we have a trade potential, because I'm going to sell you soybean for something that I would require from you. So um, think about a scenario. We a lot of our economy is based on agriculture, and we, up till recently we are called an agri-based society. Although I disagree with that, we are a services-based society now. But let's consider that scenario. Let's think about big data um, telling you for a certain crop, how much of that crop, based on the trends of the past 4 or 5 years, and based on on the predictions, it is telling you how much of that crop is required, or how much that crop or the output of that crop is going to be consumed locally, and it can be able to tell you how much of that crop's output is required in Afghanistan or in Tajikistan or in Iran or in Dubai or in East Africa. And based on that, you'll be able to see a supply gap or a demand gap. Then you think about your weather network connected digitally using IoT platforms across the country, and that weather network can have predictive analysis using AI, and it is telling you that in the next 3 to 4 months, the weather pattern or the weather anomalies or whatever it is, how it is going to hit certain crops. And you'll be able to say, okay, if I put in this crop is weather resistant, or is water sorry, it can have a regressed water supply, and it can still thrive. Or if you're saying a lot of rain coming in, and you say, oh, this crop's going to be destroyed with a lot of rain, so I'm not going to plant it. Now all of that data, all of that predictive analysis are communicated through a data exchange layer across your government infrastructure. Your banks pick up this information, and your bank says, okay, this crop is in oversupply, this crop is in undersupply, so we can export this and we can import this, and we can reduce this gap. And based on this, and then the bank says, oh, this crop isn't under danger of of water regression, or anomalies of weather patterns. So based on that, they can set up which of the crops, against which of the crops they are going to loan, against which of the crops they are not going to loan, against which of the crops they loan. The cost of the loan will be higher, against which crop the cost of the loan will be lower, and that can create a mechanism for the traders to pick and choose what crops they are going to use. Then we are talking about blockchain, and once all of that data comes in, we then analyze, based on the blockchains, based on the booking of those goods transports, we be able to analyze, are we under target or over target for such. If we say we need to have this much of supply for this particular commodity, and all of our data is on blockchain based platforms, and this is connected to our data exchange platform, we be able to completely clearly analyze that we are underperforming for the export of this good, and we are overdoing for the import of this particular good. We can quickly create paradigms to fix it. Then comes your customs infrastructure. Your customs can look at all that predictive analysis 4 months prior to budget, and say, based on this analysis, our tariff on this commodity will be this much. We are going to reduce tariff on this commodity this much, because we need this commodity to come into the country, and this is being used by everyday, by everyday, for everyday use by an average person. We cannot hike the price. We cannot allow for its prices to be hiked. So this is the tariff ratio that we are giving for this year for, let's say, tomato. Or we are going to hike the tariff ratio for onions, because we need onions in the country rather than it being imported into the country, because we have an oversupply of onions. So once you have all that data, you have all these systems integrated, connected to each other, talking to each other. I said open API are much easier to adopt, much earlier to adopt than setting up a blockchain platform. And the blockchain platform has its own requirement and has its own merits, where it will come in and it will fix the supply chain of the country, and it will fix the sudden hikes of prices and the sudden drops in prices, we be able to manage that.
Thank you very much. Lastly, with regards to trade in service, how do you think the digital platforms like Pakistan Single Window would be able to reduce the trade barriers?
I'm a huge fan of I'm a huge fan of Pakistan single window. The first time when I heard about its inception and its adoption, I could not believe it. I thought, no, no, that's good. In a country like Pakistan, this is a major step forward, and that's the seed of everything. That's the seed of what all optimization we are talking about. We can optimize our entire supply chain. Once we optimize the supply chain, we can optimize our production. We optimize our production, we optimize our revenue growth, our production growth. All of these things can happen if we start, we start optimizing all these systems. PSW provides that platform. I'm extremely happy that somebody is working. There is a whole department working on this front, and they are working so diligently. I follow their LinkedIn feed. I'm actually excited when they announce something. It feels that we are part of that bigger ecosystem that we always dream of being part of. We talk about Dubai's, and we talk about the other part of the world. What's the difference between them and us? Systems. They have these systems that they have adopted. Everything works effortlessly. That's why we love trading with these entities or these countries. That's why we love to have business over there. Once we provide the same network, same platforms, same facilitation to our country and to businesses of our country, you never know. Probably businesses from Sri Lanka and Nepal and Maldives would start finding manufacturing or trading with Pakistan far more easier than their own country, and they start relocating. And I think that revolution can start from these initiatives like PSW.
Thank you, Osman sir. Thank you very much for joining us. It was a pleasure talking to you. Thank you all for joining us today for a very exciting PSW podcast episode. We'll be back soon with another exciting episode. Thank you.